Hi, I'm B from Nectar Mechanics, and in today's video, I'm collaborating with Hobbies with Jose to bring to life his very own custom jazz figure. So just to start off with, who is Hobbies with Jose? Well, he is this amazing YouTuber who customizes pre-existing Transformers. He takes them apart, gives them a fresh coat of paint, sometimes modding them with crafting putty or 3D printed accessories, and makes them look 10 times better every single time. Some of my favorite works of his has been his Hound, his Jazz, his Earthrise Optimus, and I really wanted to reach out to him to see if he'd be interested in doing a collab of some sort. So I reached out, and to my delight and surprise, he said yes. Now I do all sorts of making, but I focus predominantly on 3D printing and that side of things, making my own figures. And as we found out in the interview with Jose that I did last year, he owns a resin printer, so he could print off any files I make on his own machine. So after some back and forth, we decided that we were going to make him a custom Jazz figure. Jazz is his favorite Transformer, he loves him as much as I love Hot Rod. And I thought, that's perfect. This takes full advantage of my skill set. So before I even start modeling, I need to figure out some criteria. What scale does he want him at? What alt mode does he want? And is there any particular features the toy needs to have? So when it came to the scale, we decided to go with Chug scale, like the 86 or Generations toys. This is a scale that I'm comfortable working in, and it also means I have lots of figures to draw reference from. The alt mode was one of the funnest parts of this project because he said, could we try doing a modern Porsche for his alt mode? You know, like a 2025 model that's got all those cool swooping curves and angular shapes. And finally, when it came to the features, he wanted to make sure it had alternate hands and alternate face plates, just to get that little bit more posing and expression when he does his final photo shoots. So with all that criteria out of the way, the only thing left was for Jose to send over some concept art sketches. But since he hadn't got those finished right away, I decided let's model the car mode. For this, I decided to use Blender to get the nice angles and shapes. Now the 2025 Porsche has lots of very distinct angles and curves, which the camera lens perspective can easily mess up. So I had dozens of reference images. 3D modelers love what's called orthographic reference, which is what Jose is currently sketching while I'm modeling. These are images that have no depth, so it's just straight on exactly measurements how it should be. The only downside is that sometimes if you're only working from that, it can look really strange when you go into an actual perspective view. So this is where my artistic eye can come in and tweak things a little bit. Maybe it's not 100% accurate, but it looks and feels right. And it wasn't just me that thought so. I was constantly sending work in progress images to Jose. Possibly a few too many, but he was nice about it. Now, even though Jose is going to be painting his model, I still want to try and color separate the parts. So I made sure things like the glass, the wheels, the hubcaps were all nice and easy separated pieces, so that way you can print them individually and paint them later. It saves a lot of time on masking off parts. And once I'd finished up the car model, Jose sent over those concept art images. And I gotta say, this is a really cool Jazz design. It kind of reminds me of the Reveal the Shield Jazz, mixed with his vintage toy, and even a little bit of 86. And I also got a perspective sketch that was done in pencil. So again, I understand how objects are supposed to look in relation to each other. So after analyzing those sketches for a couple hours, I did some of my own. These sketches are trying to figure out how he's roughly going to transform. These are extremely crude, but they work. So again, I sent those over to Jose, I got the all clear to go ahead, and so I went into FreeCAD to start doing the block model. If you're not familiar with my Transformers design process, what I typically do is I start with the block model, so that way I can make sure the figure is the correct size, I can make sure all the parts will actually interact with each other how I want, and it's so much easier to do test prints, as it's not taking forever trying to do all those details. So, using those crude sketches from earlier, I got to work designing this block model, and there was some interesting quirks I wasn't expecting to deal with when doing this design. The vast majority of it was fairly easy, right? It's an 80s car bot, so the front of the car is the chest, you've got the door wings hanging off, loads of Bumblebee toys do that, so I've got plenty of stuff to draw reference from. Except for when it came to the shoulders. If we look at Jose's sketches, he wants to have the front wheels of the car go on top of the shoulders, not on the sides. What most official designers would do is what's became known in the fandom as the trigger-happy or hot rod shoulders. It's where they're on this weird, awkward armature so that the up and down movement of the arm is actually located in the torso rather than in the shoulder. The only downside is this sucks. It doesn't look natural, and no matter how much posing you do, it's always more awkward looking than if you'd just done it the traditional way. And unfortunately, having the tire on top of the shoulder is gonna mean that I have to do this trigger-happy design. But I didn't want to let Jose down, so instead of taking the easy route, I went through a dozen different design attempts. So what the eventual end design ended up doing was the tire is just on its own hinge entirely. It's separate to the shoulder mechanism so it can fold out of the way once you want to pose the arm. The only other major issue that I ran into when doing the block model is I made him too tall. We wanted him roughly the same height as 86 Jazz, so I had to redesign his legs a few times so that, they were still structurally sound, but the correct size. So once I was happy with the block model and my test prints were working how I wanted, I chucked all of the STLs back into Blender. And from here, I could start the detailing. If you've watched my Optimus Prime series, then you know that there's two major ways that I detail my figures. The first and the easiest is just altering the base part that I've imported. If the upper leg is pretty similar to the shape of what I want the final leg to look like, all I gotta do is just tweak the base mesh. I can go in, cut little details, indent them, and sort of digitally sculpt it. But as you can see, the block model torso does not resemble the car at all. And this is where booleans are your friend and also your enemy. For those that aren't aware, a boolean action is when we use a 3D object to cut another 3D object. And this is great for getting parts to line up flush with one another or sort of imprint each other. So what I could do is I could take that car mesh that's all one piece and cut it up using the block model so that it had the same measurements as the block model and would all line up correctly. The only downside is that Boolean cuts require a lot of complex math, and even though Blender's very good at this, sometimes it needs some manual cleanup. And if all of this sounds complicated to you, that's because it is. I cannot express how many failed Jazz test prints litter that shelf behind me, but I'm really happy I did all these test prints because once I was finished and satisfied, I could send the files off to Jose being 100% confident they were going to work for him. So this is where my side of the project ends for now. The figure you're looking at the moment is the plastic one that I printed off to put alongside my other prints. And while this looks nice, Jose's one with the paintwork looks so much more premium. So I'm going to make sure I link his video below, but before I go, I do just want to say a huge thank you to Hobbies With Jose. It's kind of surreal to me that you said yes. I've been watching your videos for 4 years now, and to get to have one of my prints uploaded on your channel with all of your paintwork and everything, it's a dream come true. So, thank you all for watching, and if you liked what you saw and you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Farewell!